Welcome to the Providence College Podcast. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Email podcast@providence.edu with questions or comments. Go Friars!
Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Chittum. I'm joined, as always, by PC videographer and producer Chris Judge, class of '05. Here at the PC Podcast, it's our job to bring you interesting stories from the Friar family. And today, we are fortunate to have Cassandra Chislom here, a senior here at Providence College. Cassie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And you had a very interesting experience last summer, and then going into this year, it really is a remarkable thing. You're, obviously, I said, a senior here at Providence College, a poli-sci in public and community service, double major, and I'd love to hear more about that. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear about the Humanity in Action Fellowship that you were a part of last summer and going into this year. I guess, first of all, what is that?
So Humanity in Action is a wonderful network. It's a group of people who are activists, scholars, political leaders, leaders of NGOs, and they all come together for one common goal, and that's just to... Sorry. I'm like thinking off the top of my head, and I don't know how to describe it because so many words are coming into my head. But they meet for like the common goal of like justice and equality and equity, and they and definitely it's just a unique network of people. And what they do each year is they host fellowships. Some for during the summer, some for people in their mid-career. And definitely try to bring two people together to have conversations. And generally, that's what the fellowships are meant to do. And the fellowship I went on is a part of their summer series. And so I think that they have at least 7. There's a European branch where they go to like Warsaw, Copenhagen. And then there's just one fellowship in the United States. And I was fortunate enough to get chosen to be a John Lewis Fellow in Atlanta.
Oh, that's amazing. And obviously, how you described it is very broad, kind of a broad mission for a group to have. And given their international base of operation, you have, obviously a lot goes into it. So for you, when did Humanity in Action kind of come on your radar?
So it came on my radar my first semester of junior year. And I was just looking online for opportunities during the summer, and it popped up, and then as soon as I got off my computer, I turned on the screen, I looked left in the library, and there was a information session that was going to happen. So I just quickly ran down the written down the date, and then I just went to the information session, and from there I fell in love with the program.
Wow, so it was like a sign, literally,
yeah, right?
a physical and metaphorical sign that you were supposed to be part of that program. So what was the application process like?
It was so intense.
And it was
really intense.
Yeah, I mean, you have, and tell me if this is right, the applicant pool was 513 kids, and 48 were chosen?
Yeah.
From the group?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And it definitely was I don't know, it just, after, I was also applying for abroad at the same time. So I was really stressed out with the amount of essays that we had to do. We had to watch a video, and then we had a personal essay as well, and then the recommendation letters, and just getting everything in. But looking back on it and looking at the application, I realized the reason why the application is so hard because Humanity in Action really wants people who are really dedicated. And if you can take the time to complete the application, they know that this is something that you really want.
So for you, so you go down in Atlanta for the summer. So what did your experience down there, what were the highlights for you? Obviously you do a lot of things, but kind of the takeaways that you got from the program and the kind of the memories that you take from it. What were the most impactful parts for you?
So there were just so many impactful parts. It's really hard to narrow down your experience to a few important moments. But if I was going to pick just a few, one of them would be definitely the cohort. My fellows were just amazing people. Some of the best, brilliant minds I've ever met in my life. And that's something that I don't know. I just, you don't find that too often. And people who are picked for a scholarship and then they all immediately mesh. They all immediately, it was like a family kind of. And also the support that we offered each other was just profound. And two of the individuals I met there were from Bosnia, and they literally changed my perception of like ethnic issues or ethnic conflicts in Europe. And I don't think that's like oftentimes integrated into a lot of like, you know, U.S. curricula. We don't spend a lot of time, you know, studying about, you know, the genocide that happened in Bosnia, and hearing from these two like wonderful women like a recap of their history was just amazing for me. I think it's something I'll remember for the rest of my life, just hearing exactly like their experience and about their country. So that was amazing.
Yeah, I'm just reading the list of countries that were represented as part of the fellowship program. You had Bosnia, Herzegovina, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, and the Netherlands. And was it Netherlands, Poland, and Ukraine? Sorry, I shouldn't have stopped at the Netherlands. So Poland and Ukraine as well. So a wide diaspora of people coming from all over. So when you have that amount of people coming together, I guess first of all, kind of where do you begin? And let's just, you know, especially with this topic, you know, we're talking about social justice, and that's such an all-encompassing thing, and it can mean so many different things to so many different people. Like, how do you start?
That was just it. It meant so many things, like so many different things to different people. We definitely did study like the civil rights movement, and we kind of looked at the present movements for social justice and civil rights right now, and kind of did like a reflection. We kind of historicized the present movement and seen what we can learn from, like, you know, the modern civil rights movement, from that, from like a historical perspective. And throughout the time, various different members of the cohort had various different perspectives on what we were learning, and some thought it was like, you know, crazy that happened. Some people could empathize with it, and some, you know, frankly just didn't understand it. And it was just so interesting to see how many, like, you know, how people interpret it very differently. Like, it wasn't just one thing. Social justice didn't mean one thing. And so that really, like, made us have to, like, have a open mind to things. Like, I'm sorry, I'm, like, lost for words. But it really, like, made us, like, have to expand our own definition. Like, we couldn't just, you know, talking about these issues, we couldn't just be closed-minded. We couldn't just say, no, this is what it is. Like, it really was a challenging time to, like, take in other people's perspectives on what social justice could possibly be. Right. So how did that affect you? So not to cut, like, the whole fellowship short, but say you come home, right? You come home from Atlanta. How did that influence how you took on not just social justice, but, you know, your own education and how you approach these issues? Did anything for you change from that point, or did it more just reinforce some of the things that you already thought? I think what it helped me realize is how much I personally have to learn. I thought going into the fellowship I knew a lot about, you know, the civil rights movement and my own history and about social justice, and then meeting so many different people with different perspectives and hearing, you know, various different versions of the history we're told in class made me realize I have some, like, research to do. And so when I came back from Atlanta, I continued to do digging. I went on some history trails in Boston just to, like, learn more about the history, because that was brought up several times. And I've lived in Boston my whole life, but I never really went on tours. I did an African-American tour, and I found out, like, Boylston was a predominantly African-American community in the 1800s, which was really cool. I think it was 1800s and early 1900s, and definitely, like, it was an epicenter for, like, the freedom trails. And so going over that, looking through that, and buying books about it, it really, like, helped me realize how much, you know, you never really know everything, and how it's important to also, like, if you find out something, keep digging, keep learning. And so that's something that I think I took away from the fellowship, and I continue to do. And you brought up books, which is, you know, an interesting point to jump off from that too, because that dives right into what you're currently doing. And I'd love to hear more about this project in your own words. So a part of Humanity in Action, every fellow has to do an action project. And for my action project, I decided to create an ethnic studies library. And the reason being is because throughout my own experience, I've had a very unique education experience, actually. I didn't go to a Boston public school. I was a part of the MECO program, which was a program that bused inner city youth to predominantly white suburban communities in Massachusetts. And so I spent 12 years in the Lincoln public education system. And it was a very, very important experience for me because I think the curriculum was great. It was awesome, but I think that I didn't expect to learn more about people of color in that curriculum. I always thought what I'm learning is what should be taught. Like, we should only learn about Europe, or we should only learn about these things because those are what matters. That's what matters. And then coming to college more, I started to question that, like, why is that all we learn? And I think that it's important to learn about Europe, but it's also important to learn about other things, and how do we integrate it? How do we, because I realized in a lot of ways, a lot of scholars who are of color are in conversation with European scholars. They're constantly, there's this fluid dialogue, and I felt like we were only listening to one story, but there was this other story that was, constantly, trying to communicate back and forth. And so, realizing that in college really helped me think about, like, what if there was this, like, these voices heard? How could we do that? How could we help people hear the other side of this fluid dialogue? And so I had that kind of going into my mind when I went to Humanity in Action. That was something I was thinking about, and that's one of the reasons why I applied, just to learn more about the history I was saying that I wasn't really getting in school. And so once I went to Humanity in Action and learned all this and had that, motivation myself to continue learning and digging about my own history, I thought, how could I bring the experiences I didn't have in high school to another high school? So I thought maybe it would be a library, because I realized you can't really force, like, high schools right now to build that into the curriculum, and it might be really hard with all of the other, like, things that they have to do, to get into the year. So what if there was a library which students can go at their leisure, and have the agency to learn themselves? And it wouldn't be, like, forced. It wouldn't be, pushed into the curriculum, but it would be something that, if they wanted it, the resources were there. And the other reason, too, is when I started doing more research on the Providence Student Union organization, who was actually pushing for ethnic studies curricula, or just programs within the Providence school system, I thought, well, this is a perfect project, because it in some way connects. And so then after I started doing the project, I realized I want to write my senior thesis on this. So I ended up picking the topic and really just starting to think more deeply about, what role could ethnic studies play in completing the dialogue that we already have, and completing a curriculum, and really making it come full circle. And so that's kind of what my thesis is about, and it's connected to the project in the way that I will write what I learned from the project in my thesis. And so I'm still looking for an argument right now, but once I get the books and once the library is completed, I think that would really help me, focus on what I want to try and argue and what I learned from the project.
So what high school are you currently working with?
So I am currently working with 360 High School, but I don't know if that I want to keep it at a high school. I'm also thinking about looking for organizations. I'm trying to think about where's the epicenter of change in Providence, and where can kids get this these books without it being tied to one high school. Like, what if it was at a teen center where they all, hung out? Then it would be, more students would have access to the books. And so it wouldn't just be one impacting one school.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I'm not familiar with 360. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, 360 is a program. It's like an alternative school. It's democratically centered. The students are actually on the school administrative board. They sit in and vote on things, and it's right in Hope High School. So it's at the top of Hope High School.
Okay.
And it's really cool school. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's fairly unique, especially if you give students a voice in part of the administrative piece.
Yeah,
which
definitely.
You don't have to do too much digging in education to know that is fairly unique. That's for sure.
Definitely is.
Well, I can see how, so it really is amazing, just kind of the domino effect that kind of looking at looking at humanity in action has kind of spurred in your own education piece, both in, outside of the classroom, outside of PC, and then inside as well, which really is an amazing thing. So obviously your PC experience in the last year and a half has been centered on this, but this kind of came upon you while you were here. So when you were choosing PC, you might have had this specifically in mind. What brought you to campus?
I don't know if I could say this, but so I like I said, I had a unique high school experience, and so a part of the MECA program, an alumni from PC came to my high school, and they were looking for students who wanted to have a tour. And I was like, I'm not sure, because I wasn't really looking at the college at the time, and I never heard of it. So I was like, I'm not sure. And they were like, oh, come on, you gotta go. And so I came, and we took the tour, and it was something about how everyone was just so, like, it just seemed like there were so many people everywhere, and everyone was so, like, free. I can't explain it, but everyone just seemed like they wanted to be here. And so that really, like, drew me in. And then I remember my friar who gave me the tour, but he was really, really nice. And I remember him answering all our questions so enthusiastically, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to have this on my list. And so after I applied, I also came to the multicultural student night, the night in Friartown. And my mentor was Jessica, and I just remember, like, hanging out with her friends that night. And I'm a senior in college. I'm young, and so I didn't have any idea what college would be like, but she made me feel so welcomed. And I think that was the night I decided I wanted to come to PC, was the night when I just, we stayed up all night after we went out, and we just talked all night about her experience, about her friends, and just seeing how close I got to her quickly really made me see that I could probably create really good friendships here. And I thought, in that moment, if she likes it this much, then I'm going to like it this much. So that was the moment when I decided to come.
Oh, interesting. So it kind of started with, like, a gut feeling. And then you kind of got cemented with your interactions that night. Well, that's interesting, because you have, for every kid, it's so different when they choose a college, but it's almost always like a gut feeling plays such a large role in it, despite all, like, the different things you can look at online, all the different stats and metrics and majors. But usually it comes down to, like, all right, where am I going to, be comfortable, just generally, and then socially as well, because you have so many things to choose from, so many schools to choose from, obviously. So you really have that piece. So, no, that's wonderful. So you have, obviously you're a senior now. Yeah. You can tell that you are on fire for this topic. Just your energy level as you talk about it is, like, is out of this world. So when you think, I don't want to, like, fast forward you too much. I don't want you going anywhere. You can stay here on campus as long as you want. But, after Providence College, what do you, when you think about that, like, what kind of, what kind of gets you going, and what are you thinking about in terms of post-college stuff?
So, if that's not, like, the question you get, like, Thanksgiving, Christmas, that was the question for, like, everything. And to be honest, I'm still thinking about it. I don't know what I want to do after school, and I've been applying to, like, certain fellowships and grant projects and everything, and I've been thinking, about social justice work and stuff like that. But I don't know. I know I want to take a year off. I know I don't want to, go straight to my master's program. I want, more like experience in the real world. So I guess we'll see. I think I'm just, like, waiting to hear back from the places I applied for, and waiting to think about more deeply, is this the right experience for me? Right. If that makes sense. I know that was really, really ambiguous, but I don't know. I'm all over the place right now, I think. Right.
No, and you bring up a good point, especially if you have grad school in your future. It's nice to kind of, like, lay the groundwork in a sense. But even from a topics standpoint, there's certain areas, certain topics that you feel like you're gravitating towards in terms of experiencing, when, like, you're applying to these fellowships or these grant programs. Do you feel like you're getting tied into certain areas or more attracted to certain areas?
So I think what I'm really, really interested in, and it might come as a shock because of, like, everything I'm doing is so social justice oriented, but I'm really interested in climate change and the environment. And I actually went on a study abroad program where it was a multi-country program. So I went to Morocco, Bolivia, and Vietnam, and we studied climate change. And I think that program changed my perception of everything, because it mentioned how important social justice will be in climate change solutions. And I thought, that combines both my passions, in the environment and social justice. How do I combine those? And so I've definitely been looking at opportunities that I can do both, in which I'm doing something for the environment and I'm doing something for social justice, and somehow I'm like working towards a better future for all. So that's kind of where I think, topic wise, I will be in the future, hopefully.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
So that program, you're talking about 3 countries that aren't necessarily close to each other.
Yeah.
So that must have been just a wild trip altogether in terms of just going, to and from where you're going and kind of immersing yourselves in 3 different cultures.
Yeah, it was definitely like, I think it was the most important trip of my life because I really needed to experience the world. I never, been out of the country. Besides like a 1 week trip to Jamaica, I've never really, experienced other cultures the way I did on this trip. And I think it exposed me to not to just other cultures, but other ideas and ways of seeing the world. And I think you never really think, I think like American when you're in America, you never think, oh, this is my perception of seeing the world. It's very, one-sided. You constantly think of your perspective as just your perspective, but when you go to other places and you interact with other people and they have totally different ways of seeing the world, you start to realize, wow, I think like I'm American. Or like, I don't know. It was just interesting to see, like, I was wondering, oh, why, like in Vietnam in particular, a lot of the farmers use pesticides on the crops that they sell for a farmer's market, but they don't use pesticides on their garden. And so on the garden, they eat for themselves. And I was wondering, so then why do they pray? Like, if they care so much, if they wouldn't eat them, why would they do that, for other people? Or, why even, expose themselves to it if they know it's bad? Like, I just didn't really understand, like, how could one be organic and one couldn't? And I realized, that's just my perception. That's what my frame of reference has taught me to think about. And I could find that contradicting. But when I spoke to them, they thought about, they're not going to eat it if there's not a lot of, like, I'm not going to be able to sell as much produce if I don't use these chemicals. I have to rapidly, produce because the market demands that. So if I don't meet the market demand, I can't, make money. So that's why this is why we're using the chemicals, even though we know they're bad. But, and I don't know. That was just an example, but it was just so many different examples in which it really changed my perception on, really taking a step back and really thinking about, is this my own perspective that is influencing how I'm seeing this, experience? And so I think that's something that I definitely took away from abroad.
It seems like in both of these experiences, both, with humanity in action and your study abroad, it seems like openness and curiosity seem to be like the drivers of like trying to get to the next level within the experience that you're having.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, good luck with everything coming forward.
I don't want
to fast forward you too much. Stay here as long as you want, Cassie.
Thank you
so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.